Mid-2671. LOTAC System. LOTAC 3. Captain Raptor O'Brien. AEU Raptor Team. Around them, the sounds of bristling leaves filled their helmet's sound filter, ending up as white noise to the user. From their visor, pale violet outlines traced the environment within their view, with colors added for specific items, such as red for identified enemy targets, green for friendlies, or white for civilians. Amber outlines covered usable items such as weapons and gear, with blue reserved for objectives. The pair of individuals were now identified in a blue outline, with their respective guards covered in red. But just as their heads-up display was updated, the small group disappeared through a door located just around the corner. "Dare, we have eyes on the target, but they're with a guest," he said via their squad connection, before addressing his artificial companion. "Athena, why do we have an update on the other alien?" he asked as he lowered his weapon. She answered promptly, just before Dare could deliver his report. Based on the contents of their conversation, it seemed worth noting them as a possible source of intelligence. Have I perhaps overstepped? O'Brien couldn't really say no, as their identification system had its limits on functionality. It was advanced enough that a direct link from a ship could update targets in real time, but thanks to an algorithm, they could preload helmets with references of identifiers for the system to select from. However, they didn't always have the luxury to preload their gear with suspected enemy contacts, so they left that system up to the ships above. But in their case, they didn't have that issue, now that they have Athena who could differentiate any within their sensor's range. "No, in fact it helps a lot," he said, thanking the AI. As he finished and began to move up on the compound with his team, Dare spoke. "I'm seeing standard patrols, but their armor looks different, and the weapons are different from before. I'd avoid getting shot if I were you." From his recon and surveillance, Dare noted their armor, seeing it as worn-down versions from those they fought before with what looked like a patchwork of plates over select portions of their body. Most had weapons they were familiar with, aging and unkept ballistic firearms, but noticed that some who wore a full set of new armor were also granted a new weapon. O'Brien saw this as well with the two guards that kept their pace behind the targets. Once the area was clear, O'Brien ordered their advance. "We're moving in. Commence overwatch," he said, with Badgers, Fox, and Ryder following him as they observed their surroundings intently. Pleased with his route from before, he found easy access to the catwalk that surrounded the perimeter of the building, and with the help of Badgers acting as a step stool to clear it, allowed for all of them enter the catwalk with lightened steps. Once they were on solid ground, Fox and O'Brien secured both avenues of approach until Ryder and Vorta were on board, leaving Badgers down below. Displeased, Badgers voiced his disapproval. "Now how am I supposed to get up there? It's a little high to jump, don't you think?" However, O'Brien ignored his pleas, instead opting for another solution. "We might need cover on our way out, because I don't actually see this negotiation panning out. Vorta, stick behind me, and whatever you do, don't let go." She nodded quietly, leaving O'Brien to command his team. While it wasn't explicit on what he was ordered to do, Badgers knew what to do even if few words were spoken. To O'Brien, it was what he looked for in upcoming leaders and raiders in general, and he liked that. With a nod, Badgers left beyond the shroud of brush and tree alike, but his reduced waypoint allowed for O'Brien to always keep tabs on his soldiers. Not wanting to waste time in their cover of darkness that was quickly fading to the rising sun, they readied themselves to breach the door. Ryder then pulled out a device that mimicked in function to Strega's, allowing for one to bypass doors as long as they were electrically powered, which was the case with this one. "Got it. I'm not picking anything up in the next room on sensor, so I think it's clear." With silent affirmation, Fox led the breach silently as he glided through the door with his weapon raised to just below eye level, with the others sharing the same posture. Following silently behind O'Brien, Vorta kept tight to his back, making sure to stay behind it as much as possible. "Remember, stay right behind me," he reiterated as they moved slowly through the darkened compound. It was dark for most areas, with them pausing when the lights had suddenly come on, alerting them to the numerous doorways in front of them. "Turn it off," ordered O'Brien as quietly as possible while darting his weapon at the corners of the doorways. Ryder then tapped away on her device before turning them off from afar, with some holding their hands across their visors and shaking of their heads. The light was basically a flash grenade to them as they kept their night vision on upon entry. Upset with herself, Ryder apologized. "I'm sorry, sir. I forgot to check for lights. Running a scan now for any more tech." They waited, thinking that the lights might have alerted a guard or two, and he wondered if they were going to have to shoot their way through. However, their sensors revealed the opposite, and all seemed quiet again. With a burst of optimism, she replied after lowering her device. All accounted for. Route should be clear, but I'm getting a large reading of energy down below. Might be the hangar, replied O'Brien as they motioned for them to move forward. Did you see those doors outside? Looks big enough for a pretty large ship. She nodded. I saw. How deep do you think it is? I don't know, but keep an eye out. Athena, can we get a ping? Pertaining to his request, she obliged with a curt response. Coordinating the launch of an Owl Scout. It should just be a minute. The Owl Scout was just one of few drones to be retrofitted for the sole purpose of scouting and surveillance, with the chassis redesigned to meet their covert mission requirement. Granted, given their limited hangar space, they were only allowed 3, but it was about to prove an invaluable asset. Owl Scout is approaching the airspace. Sensors so far read good, beginning initial ping. Through their visors, as if emanating from their suits, a pulse of light passed through the building's interiors, highlighting a handful of individuals in red. O'Brien analyzed the form and noticed an unfamiliar silhouette that they wielded in their hands. It was curved from the top and bottom, a stark difference from what he remembered them using. Looks like they have new tech. Athena, can I get details? O'Brien asked as they proceeded through the building. I'm detecting a small amount of energy from their weapons. Whatever it is, it appears to be energized. I suspect they may have finally made the change to plasma weaponry. From his experience, he had only really dealt with ballistics. Even during the invasion of their planet, he went against little resistance involving plasma tech, but seeing his opponents now made him wary. The only reason being that the design was different in its silhouette from the experimental versions found during their campaign. Then let's find out, he said as he tightened his posture. Signaling Fox and Ryder, he ordered them with a motion of his hand to attack. The ping only revealed a handful of individuals within their building, revealing that it was mostly all just one level with a raised ceiling. Their opponents were isolated, far from the nearest group within the building. To maintain their concealment, the 2 raiders holstered their weapons, and instead drew their knife from a sheath located on their lower back. Their backs were facing away from them, but even as quiet as they tried to be, noticed their enemy begin to turn to their presence. Whether it was from their weight as it applied to the ground beneath them, or the sound of their clothing and armor, they lunged together with lethal accuracy and swiftness. From his helmet he could see the deed unfold. It was a by-the-book assassination. From maintaining positive control of their neck and their heavy thrust into their neck, it allowed for the Celian guard to only squirm as blood filled their mouths and throat before falling lifeless before them. It was a wonder that they didn't reflexively pull the trigger of the weapons they held, allowing him to believe that their attack was highly effective. Contacts down, reported Ryder, as she readied her rifle alongside Fox, who had already made his way deeper into the complex. Before they left, O'Brien analyzed their gear and weapons, noting the stark differences from before. They wore the same undergarment that he had grown familiar with, but their armor was different from what Dare reported from the outside patrols. The armor was fuller and covered more areas than previously. It was clean and well kept, which led him to question where they received it in light of what was essentially a trade blackout. At least that's what he thought. The same applied to the weapons. He found them wholly alien, at least from his own references to known firearms, both existing and fictional. He would take a mental note before having them advance through the complex with silent lethality until they reached a locked door that now had 2 dead guards before it. Ryder, can you open it? He questioned. He knew that he could have Athena work the door, but was adamant in nurturing a soldier's abilities in the field. His virtual companion was a last resort. She nodded, tapping away at her device until a beep sounded and the doors opened with a muffled whir. A sudden breeze enveloped them, but since they couldn't feel the temperature, ignored it and pressed forward. Before them, stairs continued downward until it leveled out to a door that blocked their advance once more. Feeling his gaze, Ryder went to work, tapping away at her device as she began her electronic recon. As he waited for results, he felt a tug from his back, finding Vorta still holding on to him. Even as he turned to meet her, she still kept her grip upon a piece of his suit. Something wrong? She was quiet for but a moment, but answered after what seemed to be several seconds. This is the first I've seen combat up close. Are all raiders trained like this? She asked. Her tone was not one of fear for her protectors, but of curiosity. He wasn't sure if she had sunk her head deep in combat vids or uncensored death videos on forums, but turned to answer her. Desensitization begins at the start of our training, And it's like this in the Marine Corps and the orbital troopers. Words like kill are repeated that it's almost second nature. It's what conditions us to be warriors. I've looked over the training most Sellians do for their basic training into a troop, but none are like what Terrans go through. Why is that? She questioned, her tone now soft and ever more curious, that her eyes seemed pleading for information. Well, humanity's nature has always been warfare, where the earliest tools found were those used to hunt and kill. We'd since grown past that, but where you see civility and order, others saw as abnormalities in a fragile system that could break at any moment. It's why few of us are stained in blood, so that everyone back home can live their lives free from war. With his response, her eyes lowered, reflecting a somber emotion. I didn't think some of you thought of it that way. Is that why it's so easy for you to... She paused, but motioned her hand across her neck, indicating the act Fox and Ryder has just committed. He nodded, when the sound of confirmation erupted from Ryder saying that she was complete in her task. Seeing the two stack against the door, he turned to them with Vorta finding her place behind him once again, replying to her before committing to their next task. It's hard at first, Vorta, but when you know what you're fighting for, and against, it makes doing my job easier. His previous disposition was simply to infiltrate, and hopefully not take anyone out in the process. But knowing the situation they were in, was given clearance to fire at will, and O'Brien wasn't about to risk the chance to see whether they'd fire on him and his team for trespassing. It was just one of many reasons why he called for their execution. And besides, he added, in the end, the means justify the ends. When his attention was now forward, he received an update from Ryder just before they opened the door. Sir, the area is interconnected with sensors of all kinds, but I use them to our advantage. Take a look at your mini-map. He did as she said, looking to the top left of his visor, and found that it provided more details of hallways long before they even traveled a route. Before, it was just an opaque background that provided colored shapes to indicate friend, foe, and their elevation. But now, it reflected details of walls and entrances. I heard that the new helmets have a memory mapping function that uploads to your tactical HUD, and this place is laced with all kinds of sensors and tech, that they also had a blueprint of the compound. Check it out. Pulling up his wrist, he did as she suggested, and lo and behold, a series of levels filled with interconnected doorways and rooms filled his view. With a pair of fingers, he zoomed in and out of the 3-story compound, settling on a large space that connected to the bottom-most level, what he assumed to be the hangar. Athena, set a waypoint to the hangar and keep IFF updated for target acquisition, he ordered. Understood, Captain. Optimal sensor range set at 30 meters lateral, 10 meters vertical, she answered, to which O'Brien added another request to their mission. Can we get a comm scramble? We don't need these guys to call for help. After several seconds, Athena came back with a reply that he found suitable. There appears to be a security station that all internal transmission are routed through before going external. If we destroy that, then no one will be able to come to their aid. Perfect, O'Brien said maliciously as they continued through the brightly lit hallways. He didn't notice it at first, but his visor's night vision had long since been deactivated, that the transition was negligible upon entering the corridor. With a change in his sensors, his map lit up with red dots and inverted triangles within nearby hallways and rooms. He pulled up his tactical HUD for the quickest route, seeing that the security station was at the end of the hallway behind a reinforced door. Thankful for the map data provided by Ryder, he gave his orders that sealed the fate of those present in the compound. Down the hall to the left, we got a door that needs a breach. Fox and I will handle a fence. Vorta, you'll stick with Ryder. Fox gave a nod as he readied his rifle, taking to the front of the group, pausing at the corner of the hallway with O'Brien following just behind. He then turned to Ryder and Vorta in the back of their formation. We'll clear the way, so make a mad dash for the security room. They nodded, even with a nervous Vorta who wielded a sidearm in her small hands. When they were ready, Fox and O'Brien aimed through the hallway towards their objective and located the unfortunate targets that got in the way of their mission. Their backs were to them, and he found that to be the best moment to strike. Seeing that all of them were outlined in red, they set their suppressed rifles to fire, and with a steady and controlled squeeze of the trigger, they fired into the patrol, felling one with a cry of pain. They turned to see the source of their comrade's pain, but before they could finish a full rotation, the corridor erupted in sharp thumps, followed by a piercing scream of bullets whizzing through the air to their opponents. Negotiation was no longer an option. All that mattered now was the capture of their targets, and O'Brien set off to accomplish just that. Behind cover, flanking the sides of a moderately sized door, O'Brien and Fox braced against the rigid frame as they took turns firing through the doorway, allowing for the other to reload while sustaining a constant rate of fire. After inserting a new magazine into his rifle, he turned to Ryder and Vorta, who were seen navigating the numerous displays and consoles on the opposite end of the room. "Ryder! Sit rep!" he called out, firing a handful of shots into the chest of an enemy that thought it best to try to rush their position. In her hand, she disconnected a cable to her personal device before firing into the station, lighting it aflame and out of commission. Beside it, 2 bodies of the guards laid still in a pool of their own blood. "Comms are out, but they got a message out to the garrison outside. Won't be long before they rush this place, and I have so much ammo to go around," she reported, taking a spot behind Fox, who continued to silently fire into what looked to be the last of their opposition. "Badgers," he called out, "we might have some friends joining us. I need a diversion." With a hushed tone of affirmation, he replied, "Finally! I was getting tired of waiting, and looks like you woke up the hive. Got some buzzkill waking up their friends." "I don't care how you do it, but keep them off us," ordered O'Brien. "It'll be my pleasure," he said gleefully, to the point that O'Brien felt his wide grin from beyond their comms. But before he could clear his voice input, Badger spoke aloud with a raised voice. It wasn't directed to them, but to his adversaries. "Come on, you slit-eyed bastards!" "What? Can't take a joke?" "Your mother must not have loved you then, but I can be your mama. Come here, sugar." It was unprofessional, to say the least, but with being so deep behind enemy lines, O'Brien just ignored it and continued down to the lower levels, taking on more of the same soldier, but at a lessened rate. He assumed it was due to most of them being on the surface, and that they had already taken out most of the security who were trying to regain the security room. Surprisingly, he had managed his ammunition well, that he was still left with at least half of what he came down with. Seeing the lull in activity, they returned to formation with Fox leading from the front, O'Brien and Vorta in the center, with Ryder in the rear. Occasionally an individual would try to fire into them, but their form was already noticed by a glaring red dot on their mini-map of where they tried to hide. Thanks to their optimized sensors, they were able to see the enemy before they even rounded the corner. However, even for how powerful that map knowledge was, it had begun to show its downfall. "Hey, Athena, I think the map is glitching," he reported as the image began to shift and distort. To pair with that, he began to feel a rising heat from the back of his neck. They all were. "Sir, it's getting a little warm," added Ryder. O'Brien turned to Fox, who nodded shortly before returning his attention forward, seeing that the issue persisted between them. Not wanting a meltdown of their helmets, he called to their digital companion. "Athena, shut off the sensors. Let it cool." "I understand. It appears I misjudged the operational limits of your helmet's function." As she said, the constant update of enemies on their HUDs was now reduced to an intermittent pulse, and their targeting assistance was also stopped to prevent an overload. This left them with only a basic motion detector and ammo count. With the addition of their reticle, he sighed at their reduced capability, but ultimately felt relieved at the simplicity of his HUD. "This feels better," he said softly as they continued down to the lower level, eventually meeting a large double door. He recalled the details of his mobile tactical map at the beginning of their raid, finding it to be the entrance to the hangar. But before they could gain access, a rumble was felt through the compound just beyond the other side. Fearing their departure, O'Brien ordered their expedition into the room. "Damn it! They might be taking off. Athena, get the door! Ryder, Fox, get ready to breach!" "Vorta," he paused. Perhaps it was due to her lack of actual combat action, but O'Brien felt it necessary to keep her safe, since their original plan to peacefully negotiate fell through just moments after they infiltrated the compound. However, he resolved himself to take the 2 individuals for interrogation, because in the end, he didn't care about the people his targets surrounded themselves with. They wielded weapons of advanced technology, provided by an unknown entity, and that was all he needed to justify their execution. They were free from Republic oversight and rules of engagement, and given the nature of being in deep space, it was understood that he would prioritize his own people over his enemy, regardless of who would say otherwise. "Athena, how's it looking?" he asked as he situated himself behind cover on the side of the door's entrance, with Vorta beside him. "Ready when you are." I just fear for Ensign Volcala's survival. Sensors are picking up an increased amount of activity on the other side. He turned to her, seeing that she held her sidearm in her hands, that now looked small by comparison, but she gave a nod in reply to his growing worry. It was a surprise that she survived so long, but attributed that success to his team's efficiency. I'll be fine. Counselor Yorla has deemed all who fire upon us in these regions shall be met with equal force. He could tell she was nervous, as her hands couldn't stop shaking, knowing full well that he and his team were the ones to fire first under his order. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The last thing he should do is approach them willingly with his weapons lowered in good faith, but he knew that was idiotic, given the nature of their mission, and kept his weapons close. You don't need to pull the trigger yet. Just stay low, and let us do all the shooting, he said, in hopes to comfort her. She nodded, lowering herself behind him as she decided to wait while they launched the assault. Stand by, she notified. They readied their unused flash grenades when Athena opened the doors, lobbing them in a high arc. They landed around the group before detonating with a deafening boom and a sudden flash of light. Seeing most of them disoriented, they fired into the group, almost indiscriminately, but did so with focus to look out for their targets. Move, he ordered, forcing their advance to a collection of crates that littered the hangar. Within the large space, a single ship took most of the space, with a large ramp extended to allow transport of cargo, which the Celian troopers seemed heavily complicit in. They moved large crates with the use of hover-capable carts, filling up the large cargo space to capacity. Not seeing their targets in sight, O'Brien ordered their advance once more, this time directed to the ship across from them. The VIPs might be on the ship. Move it, he ordered. Badgers, Dare, get me a sit rep now. With another burst from his rifle, he landed a tight pattern into the chest of an advancing Celian, who fell on their back, now motionless. On his right side, Ryder and Fox navigated through a collection of crates, making a narrow berth to catch the left flank of the remaining guards and fired into them. Even with the overhead blast doors now open, the sounds of gunfire from the surface were drowned out by the idle state of the ship's engines. But as he advanced closer to the ship, he received a call from Dare. Sir, we've got their attention, but we might have some trouble. Like what? Enemy reinforcements? Dare nodded. Looks like they have shuttles for air support. Seems like they have side-mounted anti-personnel. I don't think we brought anything for vehicles. O'Brien clicked his tongue to the report. How big are we talking? Looks to be about 3 for now. From the looks of it, if any of them get a beat on us, it'll be difficult to walk away from, said Dare as he placed his reticle over a circulating shuttle with an exposed gunner. He fired, landing the shot that tore through their neck, causing one of the shuttles to retreat. I downed a side gunner, but at this rate it won't matter. I'm seeing ships cresting horizon. Looks like word got out. Whatever you're doing, sir, you might need to expedite the objective. He was lucky they were just using shuttles, because if it were anything larger with more capabilities, then it could have been their graves. But he agreed with Dare. They needed to hurry with their mission, which he was in stern agreement with. He awaited a report from Badgers, which came through with a background of gunfire and maniacal laughter and insults. Ha ha ha! Come on! I bet you thought you were special, huh? Don't worry. After this, I'll pay your old girl a visit. Seeing that the man in question was still alive, he called out to him, snapping Badger's attention to his superior. It was like a complete 180 in terms of courtesy, but he reverted to his professional manner of speaking. Sir? A little busy at the moment holding down the entrance to the compound. They were now above them, but instead of leaving him up there to fight on his own, he ordered a tactical retreat. Now, sir, we've got at least a platoon left. I think we can take them. With a motion of his left hand, he silently ordered his 2 subordinates to advance on the ship as he captured the attention of a shy Vorta, who saw before her a scene of carnage. Denied. At best we can defend from the ship. Ship? Questioned Badgers. Fox and Ryder are attempting to apprehend the targets. I need you back here for support. He was quiet for a moment before replying. Got it. Moving now! Expect company. With a wave, he motioned for their added companion to make their way to the ship, following him when his communication ceased, finding his way onto the ramp of the idle ship. He was curious why they haven't taken off yet, seeing that the overhead blast doors were wide open and the engines were primed and ready for takeoff. Judging by the lack of red dots on his sensor map, deemed most of the ship free of hostiles. It was due to the lacking enemy presence now that he lowered his posture for a moment as both he and Vorta stood guard at the ramp, waiting for Badgers to appear. Finding themselves alone, Vorta took this moment to speak to O'Brien as he continued to scan not just the hangar entrance, but the overhead opening for any who decided to peek, expecting a surge of enemy reinforcements. "Captain O'Brien," she began softly, her eyes and head covered by her helmet normally worn by planetside Marines, along with her body armor. "Was this not supposed to be an infiltration mission, in hopes to broker their support to the new council?" He mulled over her words for a moment before responding, thinking back to the first introduction to their targets upon the catwalk just hours earlier. He recalled them mentioning the troublemakers of his world, and given the type of ship they were on, expected something nefarious in the works. Moved by his rising instinct, he began searching through the ship. That was my thought. But given what little information we had, and how armed these guys were, Athena made a tactical decision to simply do away with the guards and go straight for the targets in charge. "But why kill them?" she asked. He thought it over. Yet primal logic was all he could justify. If we managed to get in discreetly and speak with him, then there's a chance that would have worked out. But seeing how well protected this compound was, it was near impossible for a peaceful solution, and given the state of this ship, we might have missed them. She still seemed dissatisfied by his answer, and inquired heavily on his actual thoughts, as indicated by her sharp and unwavering gaze in his direction. "Fine. You want my real answer?" She nodded silently. "It's a display of power. They don't know who we belong to. And so that creates plausible deniability, because we have you. I don't even know how to negotiate. I just know of the vision that Head Counselor Yorla has for my people. It's why I joined the TRSC, because they seem like the only ones who can." Her tone was solemn, but ultimately filled with a hope and a dream, to eventually return to the days before the war, but even she knew that would be near impossible. Even this new program she was part of was small, with the current team of Celians aboard as the trial run in a field environment. "Don't discount me entirely," he then added as they reached a large door. Since the ship was cargo-oriented, he figured the central compartment with a large door was another storage section, with a large concentration of white-colored dots on his sensor map. But before he opened it, he recalled the term troublemakers spoken by the Celian prior to their guest. As such, he wasn't sure if they were criminals or simply labeled as such. It was why he hesitated to open the door. With a call to Ryder, he received his latest update. "Sir, we have 'em," she said with labored breath, figuring they had engaged in a firefight. He requested their status once more. "Are either of you hit?" he inquired, to which her replay came negative. "We're good, sir. The armor held, bringing the VIPs now." With several moments passing, he soon found the two individuals in question now before him, bloodied and silent. They were forced on their knees as their hands were bound behind them. They looked down, avoiding all contact with O'Brien. "What'd you do, beat 'em?" he asked, to which Ryder and Fox shook their heads to the side. "Well, the fat one tried to pull a gun on me, so Fox thought it best to use physical force. As for the Celian, well, he surrendered after we breached the door." If there was one thing he praised, it was the skill of an experienced raider in the art of close-quarter combat and tight corridors. It's where he saw most of his blood-striped raiders excel at when given autonomy for a singular objective with little to no restrictions. Seeing their success simply proved him right. Looking down on the two, he called to the Celian whose name he was on the verge of forgetting, along with the round one. "Baron Tarba," he began. "We've come to speak, but first." He turned to the individual with thick bristles for hair and tusks that ran down to the corners of their mouth. "What even are you?" Offended, they rebuked O'Brien while still bound and bloody. "Why you?" "I am Borga, of the Great Galactic Union." "Unhand me now, rogue." However, in his current state, he had no claim to make demands of any sort, and as such was ignored. Turning to Tarba, O'Brien inquired what laid beyond the door in the center of the ship. His presence was heavy, and his figure towered over the knelt Celian, who cowered before his larger frame. "Prisoners, the unwanted of my planet. I was just having them relocated." O'Brien could tell he forced his response, as he remained constant in shying away his gaze to the floor. He didn't believe it for a second, but before he could inquire more, gunshots rang out near the entrance. Noticing it to be Badgers, he ordered Ryder and Fox to his aid. "You two help Badgers. Vorta and I have this," he ordered. They were quick in their response, checking their ammo before moving to assist their brother in arms. When they were clear, O'Brien returned his attention to his two prisoners. "Now, you're going to tell me what the purpose of this ship is." Got it? He said, placing a heavy hand on the Celian, to which he nodded fervently. Good. Let's begin.